saviors are the supremacists. I've said it before, and I'm just going to explain it so clean. Have you ever wondered why there are some people who build an entire identity around quote-unquote liberation movements in favor of jihadists, but never against those jihadists? Why they support groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, but they don't support the Iranian people against the Islamic regime, or Afghans against the Taliban, or they silence Palestinians who speak up against Hamas, or they don't support Nigerians against Boko Haram, they don't support Sudanese, they don't support Lebanese against Hezbollah. Why? There's a behavioral model called the drama triangle, or the Karpman drama triangle. On this triangle, you have the perpetrator, the rescuer, and the victim. Now, the perpetrator obviously assumes the dominant, superior role. I'm above the victim is inferior, less than, incapable, unworthy. At a macro level, that can look like supremacy. It can look like religious supremacy, racial supremacy, national supremacy. Now, the rescuer, or the savior, on the other hand, is here to save the victim. What's interesting about the rescuer or the savior is that the rescuer also perceives the victim in the same way. Oppressed, inferior, less than, incapable. They, saviors, can victimize people as much as persecutors do. They look for victims to save so they can feel good with themselves. But while this may not look like a dominant move, unlike what persecutors do, it is a manipulative move. By fixing and saving others, rescuers believe they will gain appreciation and value for their good deeds. The rescuer also perceives themselves as being superior or above the oppressed and having the ability to pull the oppressed up. Now, that would be a good thing if they were actually pulling them up. That's not the case. The savior not only perceives the victim as inferior, the savior actively keeps the victim in a cycle of victimization. Why? Because the savior's role cannot be fulfilled unless there is someone to save. Rescuers often cannot allow their victims to move forward in life and succeed. The minute the object of their help and support no longer needs them, their sense of self-worth is affected. This is often the case with leftists and minority groups. And playing the role of savior allows them to appear virtuous and create an entire identity around virtue, while what seemingly for the benefit of others is actually at the expense of others, keeping them locked in a cycle of oppression and only serving themselves by fulfilling their perpetual role as the savior. That is why these groups don't ever support peaceful solutions. You never see them championing peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Why? They don't have a savior role in that universe. Why these groups are never supporting actual liberation movements. And in fact, they explicitly snub those movements. When you consider how they talk about Iranians vying for freedom against jihadists, they talk about that as a Western or wannabe white movement. Now, in the legal parlance, we call that a confession. It's a confession because they know that that leads to actual liberation, that leads to actual success. And they perceive civility, democracy, equality, all of these things as reserved exclusively to them as Westerners. Why? Because they perceive themselves as superior in the drama triangle, therefore exclusively deserving of civility and success. So by championing these movements of death, doom, and destruction, they get to keep feigning that they're helping them reach this liberation, which gives them the appearance of being virtuous, while actually retaining that liberation exclusively for themselves and not affording it to the oppressed, who they're keeping locked in a cycle of oppression. That is the highest form of supremacy. That is why the saviors are the supremacists, and they cannot stand the sight of actual liberation, civility, equality, success of minorities. Instead, to reinforce their role as saviors, they have to keep the oppressed oppressed, which is all they think they're good for anyway.
That woman is so brilliant, and I remember posting her when I was getting deep into figuring out what was really going on between Palestine and Israel, and people got so mad at me. She is one of the most brilliant minds I have ever heard speak on this. She is an Iranian woman, and I have these women in the West and these children on TikTok, like this little twink that called me a racist yesterday, telling me that I can't talk about this stuff and that they know more than Alika Laban. Maybe you probably couldn't even follow what she was just saying. She is so brilliant, but she is a huge reason why I woke up. And guess what? She cares about the humanity on all sides. She is one of the most nuanced voices, but she made it so clear to me what Islam really is and what these jihadist regimes are really doing. And we better wake up in the West. And if you don't know what's going on in the UK, you better educate yourself. We become so inclusive that we exclude ourselves. And it's dangerous. It is not a game. And you guys would freak out if this stuff was brought here. We have to listen to the women and the people who actually know what's going on. Please. This video is for educational purposes only. Yeah, this video is for educational purposes only. So nice to meet you though, honey.